Я можу розпочинати, Олено.
Да, я думаю, так.
Доброго дня всім. Вітаю.
Well, greetings to all our participants, either those who joined us via Zoom or who are watching us. Our streaming. I'm the executive director of the Aspen Institute in Kiev, and I welcome you to our dialogue on increasing capacity development of civil servants as a prerequisite for successful European integration. Traditionally, we would like to express our deep gratitude to our courageous defenders who make it possible for us to continue working like that. And today, we continue our conversation and dialogue with the leaders in the area of civil service within this integrity and governance project. So we all know that in light of Ukraine becoming a candidate for European integration and a candidate state for the EU membership requires a lot of efforts and commitments. And the first and foremost, it's about the civil service, which is a driver in this process. In July, we had a series of events to exchange and learn the experience of Poland and Latvia. You can watch on YouTube. We were speaking about the successful practice during the negotiation process and how to have well-thought changes in legislation and a very targeted transformation of civil service. Today we continue this topic, and we have invited both Ukrainian and international speakers. These are politicians, leaders in civil service, experts, people from the academia, and we thank our guests, our speakers, for finding the time. And I do believe that it will be a very useful and important conversation, because dialogue as such actually is the way to reach the consensus. And I want to stress that this is possible due to the joint initiative of the Deputy Prime Minister Office in charge for EU integration and the National Agency of Ukraine for Civil Service. And Natalia is part of our first panel. And it is supported by the National Endowment for Democracy, the EU for Power project, and the Reform Delivery Office at the Cabinet. So I thank you all for the support. We have moderator. We have our esteemed Roman Kubits. He's the fellow for the Institute of Philosophy. And now I again wish you, all of us, a very fruitful conversation. And now I turn it over to you. Thank you. On my part, I also want to greet all the participants and warmly welcome. And before turning it over to the speakers, I would like to make a few organizational highlights for our modus operandi within this event. First, I want to say that we have 2 streams in Zoom and in YouTube, and we have both language broadcasting. So if you would like to watch a YouTube streaming, you will see links in our chat. So you can follow the link, and you can also send the links to your colleagues. So second thing is our program is like that. Our participants of the panel will make introductory interventions within, let's say, 3 or 4 minutes each. And then we will have time for questions and answers. And that is why I would kindly ask you to formulate your questions in the chat, either in Zoom or in YouTube. We will try to get all of this together and hopefully we will have time. And there will also be the possibility to ask your question right now. So I also would like to remind you of the interpretation function. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see the interpretation function, a globe icon. You can select the original if you don't need interpretation, but then you can select a language in which you would like to hear. So please turn it on if you would like to use English or Ukrainian. Then we will have our Deputy Prime Minister on European and Euro-Atlantic integration, Ms. Olga Stefanishyna. So she has a video address which has been pre-recorded. Dear colleagues, dear Aspen community, the National Agency on Civil Service, our European colleagues, I thank you all that in the face of the extraordinary historic challenges of a full-scale war waged relentlessly by Russian Federation against Ukraine, we all still find the possibility and strength to speak about systemic transformations and reforms that our country needs under any conditions. But especially important, this discussion today for our state that on the 23rd of June this year was granted the status of the EU candidate member. So if we had applied earlier today, we would have been at a totally different stage. But despite our long path of 31 years, we are only at the start of this way. How successful we will be, how this European integration project would be implemented primarily depends on the public administration system and the politicians that lead the country. After Ukraine has acquired the candidate status, a primary priority is to review and reassess the EU integration capacities in the public administration and the quality of civil servants, formulating the clear plan for professional training and capacity building is a priority without which we cannot require any other political steps related to EU membership. So, what the EU movement means. It's about systemic reforms and competitive economy and the possibility to formulate effective policies and, even more important, to implement them based on the European principles. Now we are moving according to the accelerated procedure in legal approximation in line with the association agreement and other policies. And our goal is to have the ultimate implementation of all commitments related to this by the end of this year. And I claim that we really can do it and deliver this ambitious goal. We are now building a new generation of public servants, civil servants that would enable not only effective operations domestically, but would be really good negotiations on all chapters during the accession process. Here, we really start from scratch because it doesn't matter what concrete examples we have. We won't be able to hide behind the strategies that are on paper. We are to do everything to build an effective team and everybody having a right place in this. very fast delivery of the EU questionnaire in the wartime is a signal that we do have good potential in both public and non-public sectors. We have proved our effectiveness as the state and in terms of institutions, because the state stands in face of this military aggression. And the Deputy Prime Minister position in charge of the political way of the European integration is supported by the government office. And here we see two key elements in increasing capacity. This first is to build the requirements for specialists who would be involved in the negotiations and building relevant policies, and also approval of a systemic program for training, development, and building competences of civil servants. Of course, these are not short-term objectives, but without this, Ukraine will not be able to act as a full member of the European Union. A month ago, the president announced establishment of the European College in Ukraine, and we implemented together with the College Natalia as part of the College of Europe. And experience of EU countries that joined the EU in the last decade point out that it's important for the administration to have sound and profound internal expertise, and it should be utilized to formulate negotiation positions to stand for Ukraine's benefits. Of course, this is proficiency in the English language and the ability to take on responsibility and to act accordingly. This month's 50 civil servants will have the possibility to have training in the Natalia College. They will be the first negotiation team. Thank you. You have heard the intervention of our first participant, and now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Kornienko as the Deputy Chair of Verkhovna Rada, and I would like to ask him how he sees the development of the civil service policy in light of the EU integration challenges, these are requirements for the qualifications and new jobs and new responsibilities involved in for the negotiation team. And we understand that this is all in the extraordinarily challenging situation of war and serious budget cuts that affect not only the civil service, but many other institutions. So what is your view of the developments in the upcoming 3 years? My greetings to everybody. You know, when we hear 3 years today, so, you know, it's difficult to plan something for 3 years in the face of this brutal, full-scale war, but it's true. We are to think about the future. We are to design it in a sound manner. And if we speak about the public administration reform and civil service reform, I would like to say that here we have good news. It's not from ground zero. We have already passed in the past. The reform was launched in 2016, and during these 6 years, we had different milestones. Sometimes we faced setbacks, sometimes there were things coming in parallel. There were really sometimes serious challenges, and also We faced the pandemic that showed us the possibility for the civil service to work in a distance mode. And now, in the face of war, we see that public administration really is very agile, despite all the criticism, and people who are users of public services, they still are satisfied with, of course, they demand more, but we see that the civil servants deliver. And also, we can say that we have a good foundation to build on. For example, under the martial law already, the president signed into law the bill on administrative procedure, which is very important for what you have been saying. This is implementation on the systemic level, the approaches to interaction between the state and citizens. Because we have worked a lot after 2016 on the reform that focused on bureaucrats, on a civil servant. Who is a civil servant? How they come to service? What is their development, etc. Now we speak about the capacity of civil servants and many other actors. For example, today we have reviewed the draft on their service and local self-governments. Unfortunately, it has not gained sufficient support in the parliament, but we understand here the conditions. But as for administrative procedure, it's good that we have made the progress. And this part of legislation is indeed integrated in the European system, because it is fully in line with the European regulations and directions, and the resistance that we used to face and from institutions and from some very specific bureaucrats. It was actually a signal that this law needs to be adopted. So because it actually allows us to rebuild and to have more transparent relations between the state and citizens, including the service delivery. And when we speak about the capacity, it should rest on rules, values, so everything that is enshrined in the European Union. So then this capacity will translate into very concrete mechanisms and protocols of action, and then we will see a very specific approach. It will not be fast, but this is the right way to go. It is obvious that there will be a lot of headwinds on the way, but we would address all these challenges. And of course, when we speak about the optimization, we know that there is a fine line between the needs of institutions and the public administration system and the financial capacity of the state. But on the other hand, we always have the public demand for services, and so that there wouldn't be overstuffing, there won't be corruption, etc. And we thank the government and the National Agency on Civil Service for their efforts. And we also have the Minister of the Cabinet of Ministers is dealing with these issues. We know that the Ministry of Digital Transformation is very much involved. And now we have Deputy Minister on your EU integration. And this is all good news because you know then 3 years ago, when I was taking the oath, civil service was a topic that was interesting for just a bunch of people. And now it's the job of the entire government. And this is great. This is the resource because public administration reform is the mother of all reforms. And it should be moved by everybody, and everybody should be involved. It's a team effort. So, for the capacity, I have a very optimistic outlook for this. So, we will move along the set path. It's not a revolution, it's evolution. And this is great. This is all right. But if quick decisions are necessary, the parliament will be ready. Because during this time of war, the parliament has already adopted a number of decisions that would really help the government. It's also, for example, that concerns human resources and acceleration of processes that are necessary. And of course, this is about budget requests that need to be addressed in a very expedited manner. You, and before turning it over to other participants, I want to remind all of us you can ask questions under interventions. So you can use the chat function in YouTube, and you also Q&A function in Zoom. Please also introduce yourself. So if we have time, we would also give you the possibility to turn on your camera and ask your question. And now I turn it over to the head of the National Agency on Civil Service, Natalia. And the question is also not so easy because this is the agency in the central government that indeed is tasked with enormous objectives. It's not only in terms of education and training, how to integrate the new requirements in the recruitment system. It's a big challenge for the institution because I know that traditionally the agency faces a lot of obstacles trying to change the status quo. I would like to hear how Natalia views the challenges and opportunities and obstacles, and what are the immediate plans. Thank you, dear colleagues, my greetings. I would like to start by addressing Mr. Oleksandr Kornienko that indeed there is continuous support and cooperation, and sincerely I say that it really was very painful that two voices away from the approval of the draft and what was published by Bezgin after the voting. This is the support to national agency, how to use and have protections. And we count on honest, open, and constructive cooperation because it's already our brand. It's our reputation and image we all are speaking about. And my intervention will be about the gratitude to specifically Mr. Oleksandr Kornienko, Mr. Bezgin, who supported this draft law, and I thank our colleagues, international partners who also provided their contributions and support, and of course, partners in the Secretariat, the office, the association. This is history, but we will move on. At the same time, responding to what Roman has said, that the national agency leads in policy development. So we are responsible not only for capacity building through professional development. It is a key element. I would actually stress it. We have shared the materials. So the highlights to present our focus in the EU integration path. Here, you can learn about our cooperation with the government, institutions, international partners, academia. So, what we have implemented too. So, the programs that we have implemented in capacity building. And Ms. Stefanishyna, the Deputy Prime Minister, she mentioned the project Natalia for capacity building, and I would like to say that we have really great hopes that indeed it will result in improved capacity of civil servants. We also ought to understand that Ukraine cannot afford such a gap as a lack of platform for training. And that is why we promote establishment of the High School of Public Administration. We had parliamentary hearings, and we are grateful for the support to our Line Parliamentary Committee. And so public servants must have access to best programs, not only in Kiev, but also in the regions. And it should be based on job classification, on grading, also considering the possibilities for professional development. We cannot waste valuable resources, and each person really is important for us. If we speak about civil service framework, and also the adaptation of the domestic legislation to the EU at key, there is a question about the English language proficiency. And we are to take care and to ensure that everybody has access to language proficiency learning. And this is an example. We have launched very active cooperation with the largest education program, Education First Language Learning Solutions. We have signed a memorandum and we have weekly meetings to design content for Ukrainian civil servants. And very soon, civil servants will be able to study English free of charge. It's a unique offer. And it will indeed be the possibility also to learn about the EU acquis. Speaking about the future, we also are to take stock of what has been achieved as part of the public administration reform. I want to remind you that we have implemented the concept of reform staff. We have selected very targeted sectorial specialists in practically all ministries. And when we speak about EU integration, let's recognize that reform staff are those who have been the drivers in this process, and they ensure delivery of the AA commitments. So these specialists, to a certain extent, would also be policy developers, and they will also be similar to reform staff. And we also are to take into consideration the issue of coordination. We are to have clear vision which posts and units will be defined as those responsible or dealing with EU integration. We have shown the requirements in terms of the functions and the purpose of the positions. The government agreed with the EU and approved single approaches to the professional competencies. And that is why all reform staff undergo assessment according to the competency framework. According to the current legislation in Ukraine concerning civil service and service in local governments under the martial law, the competitions have been suspended. Now we have direct appointments in line with the requirements to positions like education, citizenship, track record or experience. So it's a challenge how to ensure this selection. In the wartime, also not going beyond the legal framework. And we also are to remember about the positions with direct appointments during the pandemic. And we predict there would be the increased workload, and we are already trying to address this. And it's also important that in order to attract the best talent and to preserve the capacity, we are to offer certain conditions. So we cannot avoid speaking about the level of pay, not only for RSTs, but also for the entire civil service corps. And here, an important step is the development of the draft law to introduce single approaches to civil servants' pay based on job classification with grades, and its pending review in Parliament. The new system envisages integration of policy developers, RSTs, and specialists in charge of EU integration in the common scheme. And this is Family 3 on legal drafting and policy development. For example, it includes the functionalities such as strategic planning, coordination of activity of government agency to ensure policy development on EU integration, etc. But I want to say that the war poses unprecedented challenges. It's also review of the functionality, suspension of classification, budget cuts, etc. But we go on working in order to receive data that would help us to avoid risks and to take informed decisions. We have conducted tentative estimates for the reform costing based on the provisional classification. So, despite the increasing challenges, the national agency continues its way forward and does everything to build and improve capacity to develop civil servants, servants in local self-governments, the work on the job classification, introduction of the new salary system, and we are preparing for potential renewal of competitive selection using the tools that even under the martial law can actually ensure the security of all participants, and all these steps form the basis to ensure the capacity in civil service, and that will be the prerequisite for successful European integration of our country. Now we turn it over to Natalia Farsyuk, Director of the Government Office for the coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and this is really the institution that takes the main workload and related to EU accession, because this is the office tasked with the coordination of all government agencies. This is the analytical work, etc. This is really a gargantuan workload. And I would like to ask Natalia, from the institutional perspective, what are the major institutional challenges faced by your office? What are your plans? Where do you see risks and bottlenecks?
Дякую. Дякую, колеги. Не буду довго забирати час. Дійсно,
Thank you for giving me the floor.
зараз постало, тому
I wouldn't take a lot of your time. Indeed, we have a lot of challenges.
яке в нас
Because
відбулося, і ми говорили про те, що
gaining of the candidate status, and we already mentioned that we should have done it earlier, but frankly speaking, during the war, we were really not fully ready to continue this work. So we now are in the situation, for example, in the government office, when the number of staff members officially employed, the 24 items fewer than the number of chapters for negotiation. So it means that it would be an extraordinary workload. We felt it during completion of the EU questionnaire. And what Ms. Stefanishyna has mentioned in her address, it's very important to cooperate with the national agency, with the project Natalia for capacity building, setting up of a university, and having access to training and education progress in the European Commission. We need it as air, and all this needs to be launched as soon as possible. It's great to feel the support of the national agency when they say we have a program on the English language and other things. Indeed, it's very encouraging, because tentatively we plan that we are to be ready to open the negotiations by the middle of the next year. We have very little time. What it means, it's not only that the capacity of the government office should be significantly increased, it's also the capacity of the parliament to work on the EU integration laws, where MPs are the ones who can initiate legislation, and we need to have capacity in parliamentary committees and supportive secretariats, etc. And the same capacity should be built in all ministries. Of course, depending on the workload related with the negotiations, we have had a short review. We have the capacity in 1/3 of chapters, and 2/3 will present real challenges. And here, probably, it will not be expedient to build separate units in agencies and ministries, because typically they deal with the monitoring and collection of information, but the sectoral units, during implementation of their functions, building policies, drafting legislation, they already are to do all this in line with European legislation. So it should not be up to separate people, separate individuals. This should concern civil servants in policy departments, who by default understand the key relevant directives, regulations, etc. As for the negotiations, the level of the English language, of course, should be high level so that individual who is a negotiator or supports, for example, deputy ministers would not waste time to translate in their head. They should have a very nuanced understanding of everything that is discussed on the negotiation table. And that is why the efforts of the national agency and the reform delivery office, we hope that it will indeed materialize as soon as possible, because today we receive support from many technical assistance projects, but in view of the increasing workload, because we are to deliver on the AA according to the expectations of the Prime Minister and the President by the end of this year, it means to adopt all primary and secondary legislation. So the TA projects helping us now, they increase the number of experts and can shorten the timelines. So we are to be prepared that at the beginning of the next year, there may be complications with the exhaustion of the available technical assistance, and that may slow down our process in legal approximation and preparation for negotiations. And our next speaker, the Executive Director of the Reform Delivery Office, Mr. I have a couple of questions. It's not a secret that you are a person who has been working a lot in different roles in public administration reforms, and you really have a very good understanding of the current situation, the new challenges to civil service related to this extremely demanding negotiation process. And I have three simple questions. What bottlenecks, what are deficiencies today present the key challenges? And what is the national response? Number two, which priorities should be set today in order to address the bottlenecks? And then, as the executive director, how the network of about 200 people working under the Ukrainian reform architecture can help in this process. Thank you. And dear colleagues, thank you for inviting me to participate in this activity. And first and foremost, I would like to express the gratitude to the Aspen Institute and the colleagues, Natalia, Oleksandr, Kornienko, Natalia Forstik. They are delivering a huge work to make our European dream come true. And I want to say that the public administration reform today has become very clear why it is necessary, why we were discussing state secretaries, policy analysis, directorates, all these issues. And well, but the key, merit-based recruitment, if we look back 20 years ago, it was not a general rule, but now we cannot even imagine our life without it. And then the local self-government reform, how far we have gone, it's also huge progress. but the path was long. Now we have crystallized the understanding what for. So it actually helped Ukraine to stand. And the very thing that being a country at war, Ukraine can discuss accession to the EU. And all our European colleagues admire Ukraine because it is standing in the face of this brutal aggression, because institutions operate, and that is why it allows us to speak about some accelerated negotiations. And we have not lost visa-free travel, etc. So we have even enhanced possibilities. As for challenges, I would say that if we speak about 170,000 pages of EU acquis, and this is a constantly developing mass. When Poland was in the accession, the number of pages was different. So these pages ought to be translated, understood. We ought to understand the gaps and impact on our sectors, and it's a dynamic situation. And impact assessment on sectors, this is what you do. This is the stakeholder impact assessment. Why Olga is speaking about the quality of negotiation process? They run a wrong step, and our nurses would not be able to work in the EU countries because civil servants have not understood something in the right way. So, and it's all on the shoulders of civil servants. Then, if we now look at the accession process in the Western Balkans, they had initial benchmarks and then the final benchmarks. And when we looked through all of this, and always in the center is capacity. It's not just to translate and to implement or include the EU norms in legislation, which is a huge challenge in itself, but it implements so that sanitary and phytosanitary norms in practice, so that Ukrainian food would be as safe as the EU requires. And there should be a huge chain of checks. Some reforms are very expensive, and we are to be able to do costing. How much will it cost for the market, for the business? Thousands of participants will be involved in negotiations. We can see it on the example of Croatia, and we have Tamara here with us in the second panel. It's not a small team. These are thousands of people, business associations, faith organizations, civil society. It's the entire country. So what should be a priority? Go back to the base. We are to restore merit-based recruitments, to make sure that the government is a key legislator, so that the government proposes legal initiatives. It's not always understood, but now it's a matter of survival. And we are to have open and mass learning. And it's so great that Natalia College will give access to elite education. But we are to think how, for example, to one click in Google, you ask how to find a course on EU integration, and you have a whole offer. And we are to think about secondments, like Natalia says, that she lacks capacity. Let's think about secondment, rotation, and think about some ingenious solutions. And then also proficiency in English, French, and all technical assistants should focus on this. So when we speak about high demands and the project that can end soon, but we have thousands of projects, and now everybody is on the front of European integration. And then how RDO can help? We indeed have 200 consultants. It is financed by multi-donor account. And these 200 consultants, they are to a certain extent stable. So about a half of key chapters could be covered. As for the support of the government office and the office of the Deputy Prime Minister on stakeholder involvement, negotiation positions, communication support, sectoral expertise, we are ready to cooperate, and we are very happy to see how far we have been able to progress. So thank you. Again, I remind our listeners that they can put questions. We have time for answers. So I have one question from Natalia. Natalia, do you hear us? Switch on your camera so you can voice your question.
Пані Наталія, ви нас чуєте? Ну, бачите, вона пише, що, на жаль, не можу вімкнути камеру.
So Natalia writes that unfortunately she cannot switch on the camera, but can you speak?
Ну, якщо ні, то я...
Well, if not, then let me read this question. I would like to learn about concrete areas in the development of civil service in the area of HR as steps towards European integration. I assume that this is my question. So yes, indeed, I'm happy that Natalia has highlighted this topic. And if we speak about human resources, I believe that it is very closely related. It's one of the reform areas, and the national agency is addressing it through the general department in charge of HR. As for our cooperation, we have the EU4PAR project. We have already launched the second series of HR workshops. So we really have a competition. We have received 144 or 45 applications from participants to learn about the new HR tools. So we have training, and we also continue to work on the improvement of the assessment and appraisal procedure. We have a new regulation that will be adjusted. We have received agreement from the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Digital Transformation. They have no critical comments to our draft. As for individual programs for the training and development for the next year, we have new functions. There will be a new form. So all these changes mean that we teach them how to conduct appraisal, how to conduct selection, how to assess competencies of candidates. So our general department also prepares the methodological support as manuals, also trainings, etc. I, for example, have this manual for selection board members, how to assess competencies of candidates for category B and C positions. And it's not only about learning for HR people. We now focus a lot on culture of civil service, barrier-free culture. We invest a lot of efforts to prepare all tools and toolkits that would be instrumental after we win the war and after our troops come back to their civil service positions. Today, more than 3,500 civil servants are part of the armed forces. And when they come back, they will need adaptation to the civilian life. And we will have to understand also how to behave and how to work. So for us, another topic, barrier-free environment, is very important. We have a working group, and you know that we have a joint course and under the auspice of the First Lady. So there was a kind of activity. So I'm mentioning it to say that there are a lot of relevant issues. And then stress resilience. So the communication that we can deliver to our HR units for further cascading. So this will be another area. As for the Ukrainian School of Governance today, I already mentioned that we are promoting the High School of Public Administration with the changed focus. Of course, the key focus is on EU integration training. These are 35 chapters and points that we completed in the EU questionnaire. And similarly, the EU integration training will be structured accordingly. The modules are developed for civil servants by Education First that will help to build English language proficiency. So there would be free of charge training for Ukrainian civil servants, and the program will be launched during the Richelieu Forum on the 22nd, 23rd. We will announce, and then there will be an open registration for this kind of training. It's a unique program, one of the strongest, one of the leaders in education. So we have appraisal assessment of competences, adaptation of civil servants. So the civil servants who will return from their military service and the ones who will also enter civil service. So we are also speaking about internal training, and all these are the topics addressed by the General Department, and they are quite successful. I hope that I have answered your question. I see we have a follow-up question. Oh, thank you, Natalia, for your answer. Now I have a question, and I think that probably it's for Natalia Farstuk. In light of what we have heard, and because our second panel would also include a representative from the Natalia College, so we speak also about the training of negotiators, people who would directly engage with Brussels and other national governments. I wonder, what is the mechanism to identify negotiation groups? How many people you plan at least to prepare, at least in the immediate future? Yes, it's a good question. I think that now we can only speak, and our colleagues from other countries can speak about their own experience. We understand for ourselves that the negotiations would be done within clusters. We have 35 chapters, and we hope that they will open and close not one by one, but at least in groups. And we hope that simultaneously 3-5 chapters will be opened, because the practice is that the first chapter is the rule of law, and then it opens first and it closes last. And simultaneously negotiations take place on other chapters. And we understand that the deputy minister would lead in a particular negotiation team, but there will be a lot of people behind him from the cabinet of ministers, from agencies, and as Tatiana said, from business associations, who will prepare their professional standing and inform about nuances about our readiness for implementation of particular EU acquis. So essentially, the negotiations mean that in any case, we are to implement everything. We cannot say that we don't want to implement something. But during the negotiation process, we can bargain about some postponement in some areas that EU can grant the delay for implementation of particular norms. So it's not only about parliamentary approval. So implementation after adoption is a somewhat different story. So how many people? I cannot even imagine. It should be really an army. And we are to prepare their capacity and educate them about all the nuances of legislation that would be subject of negotiations. So I really cannot give you a definite answer. So we can listen to our colleagues. They will tell us their stories. You know, everything evolves. The legislation is a living organism. It grows, it evolves, it becomes greener, etc. It's hard even to imagine. I think we have a possibility to have a video. We have Oksana Grushanska, please. Can you join us?
Пані Оксано, ви нас чуєте?
Може, ви зачитаєте, пане Романе?
Ну, насправді тут вона адресувала
Yes, I see that there's several questions in the one passage, and that is why I wanted to invite Oksana to speak. I would pick up the essence. It's about the choice, whether we are or you are to hire new people, or you can utilize the civil servants who already work in relevant positions and significantly boost their capacities, for example, in terms of the language, diplomacy, stakeholder engagement. So how to choose whether to hire new people or to train existing personnel? I think anyone can take the question. Thank you. You know, I think that we need to go in parallel, considering all the nuances of the EU acquis. So we are to understand them also in Ukrainian legislation. Ukrainian laws, for example, on infrastructure, aviation space, and it's very difficult to hire absolutely new people who could simultaneously have understanding of Ukrainian and European legislation. So I think we ought to go both ways. I think that we are to build mixed teams. If we just speak about requirements, it's not a question for the EU integration units. It's a question to line departments, to their lawyers. So all of them, sooner or later, but I think sooner, they should receive requirements, and the English language proficiency at B1 with some intense training. And on the other hand, if we have this possibility, we are to hire new talent, young generation as the future of this process. We are to start this engagement and recruitment, and there should be really a very well formulated strategy, very focused strategy. And I think the national agency is working on it, and we all together. Natalia, would you like to add to this? Yes, I agree. I entirely agree with Tatiana. I think it makes sense to mention that we all are focused on the competency, it's foreign language proficiency, it's without saying, but I also want to stress that starting from 2024, we have postponed job classification, and in the catalog, we will have a set of professional competencies that would be required in order to deliver in a certain position. And these competencies will be aligned with the programs that will be designed and approved at the High School of Public Administration. So it's for your understanding how we will shift the focus. The professionalization will be in the context of growing in one profession. We have the junior level, the mid-level, the senior level, and each has a set of competencies that would be clearly defined. And in order to progress, our draft law that is registered in Parliament, and so far it has not been included in the agenda because of the martial law. So it is about also career progression and promotion. So according to this catalog and these programs, there will be the possibility uh, to develop one's career without competitions. So we also envisage this kind of development. So we have training in High School of Public Administration and a catalog and, of course, foreign language proficiency. So thank you. I see that we have more and more questions, and I do hope that our speakers will be able to provide some answers in writing, but we have rigid timing. I would like to really thank all speakers for the time that they have been able to contribute in their very busy schedules. So they shared their thinking, and I hope that for all of us, we have a little bit better understanding of the outlook in this area. Thank you. And now we switch on to the second panel. It's a more international in character because we have colleagues from other countries, from institutions who can actually give us good advice.
Переходити так вже до наступної частини. Першим доповідачем в нас буде пан
Yes,
Марек.
now we can go on to panel 2. First, we have speaker Marek Tabor. He represents Natalia College. And my question is very simple. So we have heard from our deputy prime minister that your institution is providing really absolutely valuable support. And we would like to learn more in detail, probably. What is the program that is being prepared? What are the topics? What is the content? How many people are you planning to train, and within which timelines? What's the duration? And how participants are recruited and selected? Please.
Thank you very much, Roman. Let me start by saying thank you very much for inviting the College of Europe, Natalia, into this excellent session. We really appreciate the opportunity to take part in it and share the information about the Natalia for Capacity Building project. I was listening to the earlier presentations, and I have to say that before I move on to the description of the project, I wanted to say congratulations to the Ukrainian administration. Ever since 24 February, also before, but especially after 24 February this year, we are in contact with the government office, with the NACS. And I have to say, in spite of the dramatic situation in Ukraine, work is going on. It's, you could say, almost business as usual. Also, I was watching carefully the news about development of the answers to the questionnaire. I have been in the Polish administration when the answers for our questionnaire have been prepared, and I have to say I really appreciate that, again, in a time of war, this work was done so timely and so in such good quality. So congratulations again. Now, going back to the Natalia for Capacity Building, it started in early 2021. The initial plan was to have 16 e-learning courses, 6 so-called compulsory, about various aspects of European integration of Ukraine. It was about the internal market or about transport and energy, for example. And then we planned 10 what was called facultative courses, so optional courses, related to, for example, protection of financial interests of the EU or to anti-corruption, etc. These were planned to be disseminated to a special learning platform. The topics have been selected by way of a very carefully elaborated training needs assessment. The second component that we planned was face-to-face sessions for 240 Ukrainian civil servants who were planned to take part in on-site sessions in Poland with study trips to the European institutions. And then the third component was 6 scholarships for Ukrainian civil servants to study the European Interdisciplinary Studies program at the College of Europe in Natalia. We developed the 16 e-learning courses. I don't want to waste time now describing all the topics, but they can be found online at the website of the project. It's called Natalia for CV. The courses are now ready in English. They will be ready in Ukrainian until the end of September. We have registered so far 380 Ukrainian civil servants who wish to take the courses. We are now finalizing talks with NACS on scoring or some final details regarding scoring for taking all the different courses, but it is a matter of days that the courses, all the e-learnings will be made available to Ukrainian civil servants, and we will move on with registering of the next people, because applications keep coming in, but we wanted to first register the first batch, let people have access to the trainings, and then move on with registering the other people who applied in the meanwhile. Now, because of the Russian invasion on Ukraine in February, we started discussing with the government office and with the government office for coordination of European and Euro-Atlantic integration, and with NACS and the EU delegation in Kiev, how to best reprogram the project, repurpose it to make it fit to the new situation. It was clear that the e-learning components would be online, would be available. These can be taken at times and paces convenient to the civil servants in their free time. So we thought it's good that we leave them on. But we had long discussions on what to do with the other components. And together with the Government Office for Coordination of European Euro-Atlantic Integration and the EU delegation, we designed a different scheme. The new program will be targeting 50 civil servants who will be coming for 2-month trainings to Poland. Trainings on horizontal aspects of the EU decision-making, of the EU legislative system. There will be simulations of negotiations. All of these trainings will be with a very strong focus on preparation for negotiations, because the group of 50 civil servants will, as we discussed this with Prime Minister Stefanishyna, they will form the core, the first group of the back office of the negotiating team. For people who will be handling the dossier of the green agenda and sustainable connectivity, we have, if you like, a bonus, because together with the Secretariat of the European of the Energy Community in Vienna, it's an institution set up by the European Commission, we will have people also traveling after they complete the project in Poland. There will be a group of people who will travel to Vienna for another 2 months of internship at the Energy Community Secretariat at no additional cost to the project. And indeed, we had signed already an agreement with the Energy Community Secretariat that which confirms that this additional element will be offered by colleagues in Vienna, and they also offered to delegate one of their experts to serve as a mentor to those who will be trained under the repurposed Natalia for capacity building. The other leg of the project will be research activity. Each of the participants who will be coming to Poland for the 2 months, they will be coming with a predefined topic that they will have to research, and following the research, they will be expected to prepare an analysis, a position paper, a recommendations paper, which again is meant to help prepare for negotiations. We have one expert or one trainee for every negotiating chapter. So for each of the negotiating chapters, there will be a topic defined by the authorities in Kiev, which will be researched and may form a basis for development of Ukrainian negotiating positions at the end of the day. Not only will provide assistance in the methodology, we will provide assistance in or training in policy analysis, identification of sources on sources of information on the EU, on their key, on solutions used by the countries of the previous enlargements, notably the more recent ones. Then the third component of this training program will be field trips. Each of the participants will be in the position to take either national or in Poland, field trips in Poland, to go to conferences, to go for interviews in public institutions, to meet with maybe former negotiators. So they can travel internally, they can be able to take 3 of those. And then each trainee will be able to avail 1 international study trip of choice. This can be European institutions, for example, in Brussels, or administration of a member state. Of course, the agendas, lists of meetings, and topics to be discussed will have to be agreed internally in the project before such study trip is organized. We will be having mentors, so the participants who arrive in Poland, they will be offered assistance from practitioners and experienced practitioners, academics, who will help them in sort of fine-tuning their individual training programs. We are hoping that the first group will come already in October this year. We are now finalizing some formalities with the EU delegation, but it seems that we can have the project kickoff in the repurposed project kickoff in October of this year. Of course, the target is active civil servants, people who have been engaged in the European integration dossiers in the previous years in the administration. Of course, people who will have been granted authorization to leave Ukraine and do the training in Poland for 2 months. As far as the language requirement, which has also been touched in the first panel, the minimum level is B1 in English. If the agreement is that we have 2 candidates of equal standing, if you like, preference will be to those with a higher knowledge of the English language, because all the trainings will be done in English. So we're hoping that following the training program, there will be, at least in the first set, we will have 50 people trained on the horizontal aspects of the negotiations, people who will have strengthened knowledge in their respective areas of competences. So in the areas that on topics that they would have been assigned prior to leaving for Poland, we're hoping that they will have enhanced skills. But also what I think is extremely important is that the people who will have completed the training will also create some network in Kiev, so that they will know each other, they will build a sense of trust and cooperation between each other, that there will be a sense of team spirit amongst them. But also, I think the takeaway is that the people will have an opportunity to build contacts, establish contacts with their opposite numbers, for example, in the European Commission or in select member states. Clearly not all, but they may choose to travel to, for example, Polish public administration and set up contacts there, or travel to I don't know, Spain and establish contacts if they feel it is more beneficial for the purpose of the work that they are responsible for. So the question of networking is also important. Of course, those who will travel to Vienna to the Energy Community Secretariat will have this added value of having more contacts on the green agenda and sustainable energy, which are what the energy community is about. Maybe I would end here. Of course, ready to take any questions there are, but I don't want to talk too long. So thank you very much.
Дуже дякую, пане Марek. І
Marek, thank you so much. And now I invite Rafał Hukawy. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your last name. He is the former director of the EU integration unit in. So my question is that Ukraine has a firm belief that Poland was among the most successful countries that actually achieved the best conditions in EU integrations. So I don't know whether it's a myth or not that Poland had an unprecedented success, but the person who was directly involved and directly oversaw, you could actually give us a better picture. So from the perspective of the similar work in Ukraine and the necessity for capacity, the question is that we know that 3,000 people were involved in the negotiation process. Where did you take these people? Were there those people who had been working, or it was an external recruitment process? And what were the skills? And how the skills were built for this negotiation team? And the most important thing, what are the key lessons from your experience you think Ukraine should consider at the initial stage in order to avoid risks? So over to you.
Thank you, Roman, very much. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting event. So just to correct your introduction, I was not the director of the office. I was already after Poland joined the European integration, I became the Director General of the office, and the Director General of the office is the highest civil servant, which is managing staff, finances, public procurement, etc., etc. So I was not the person that was overseeing all the works of the office, but before I worked as a director and deputy director of different analytical departments supporting the negotiation process. This is my introduction concerning myself. First, I would like to tell you something just to better maybe understand the processes, the things I will talk about our office. So our office, called Office of the Committee for European Integration, was very much like the governmental office in Ukraine, but it was decidedly much bigger in terms of staff. We had about 250 civil servants, a dozen of departments, including between 25 and 30 people responsible only for legal approximation. Our tasks also covered a much larger spectrum of coordination area. So apart from the two main functions, the coordination of the work of the line ministries and legal approximation, it also included the analytical tasks, which were very important for the outcome of the negotiations, but also, which is important from the point of view of the subject we are discussing today, so the coordination of European training, scholarships, traineeships for the public administration that we did before, few years before, I'd say, our colleagues from the Office of the Civil Service joined this process. We were also responsible for the coordination of foreign and bilateral aid, which was devoted to the support of the integration accession process. And this was a very important source for financing the trainings, the scholarships, but also the expertise we needed for the accession negotiations. Concerning the number of people you mentioned that that we trained in European integration, you know, it's always the question who is counting. So I found even information that we had some online courses in which 12,000 people participated. True is that we also trained really thousands of people from local authorities on selected EU issues, budget, regional and environmental policy. So I'm not able to give you a precise number, but it's quite important that in 2011, so when we had our first presidency, so we had some 1,200 people, so less than 3,000 registered of the members of the core of the presidency, and probably this number is closer to the reality concerning the number of the people really engaged in the integration and the association, in the negotiation process. Concerning recruitment, I think here I will disappoint you a little bit, because we had different perspectives, the office and the line ministries. So the office, when it became operational in '97, it was a time we had to start in almost all areas and aspects from scratch, including hiring people. So there were some transfers from line ministries, but the majority of people were newly recruited, had usually no previous experience in public administration, sometimes some purely theoretical knowledge on EU integration. In comparison to today's situation, the situation also in Ukraine, this was a time where there was almost no practical knowledge on European integration and accession negotiations in Poland, with the exception of overall knowledge on the European communities, the legal system, or some selected policies at the Polish universities. So therefore, in the beginnings, it was us to organize regular meetings with a group of selected professors in order to transfer some information on the integration process, but also to have some kind of brainstorming. The situation in line ministries concerning the hiring of people for the European task and the negotiation tasks was a little bit differentiated because they already existed. So they had to transform and adjust their organizations also, to the accession to the negotiation process, but also to different changes of the structures of the government. So the situation was, I'd say, much more complicated. But in the majority of cases, so the selection process consisted in replacing the old guard with fresh blood. So I'm laughing because today I'm also an old guard in the public administration in Poland. So usually there were people with no previous experience, and it was a time where we had no manuals, no trainings on how to select people. So we just organized meetings, interviews. We had some recommendations, but many of them, we would say today that we took them directly from the universities. Obviously, the situation became more complicated at a later stage when this is a natural process in the public administration. That people, after becoming experts, decided to leave public administration. So here the requirements were much higher than when we started, but it was not very difficult to replace them by people from other line ministries, but also from universities, which in between developed some specialized courses. There were even people from the private sector that tried to, become better experts in selected areas. Concerning the way how we trained people. So obviously we started with very general trainings for us, the line ministries on the European communities, institutions, policies. We organized them with usually with specialized and prestigious universities, also some Polish institutions. We were using for this actions, as I mentioned before, the money we had from different European, international, but also bilateral programs. So we were able to train our people in institutions forming the personnel for their own administration in like the French École Nationale d'Administration or the German Autrichian Verwaltungsakademie. The office also signed several privileged membership agreements with prestigious institutions like the College of Europe, the European University Institute, ERA, APA, and a few others, which allowed us to participate in different seminars, conferences, scholarships on, say, preferential conditions. So we paid a reduced membership contribution and enjoyed preferential treatment. I would say here that paradoxically, this variety of opportunities sometimes posed to the directors of the office, but also the directors of the departments dealing with European integration and ministries, problems on how to organize the work, because we sent people very often to some prestigious institutions. After certain time, we had obviously to change this approach and organize much more technical and specialized opportunities and events. Today we would say on-demand training. So, and here the system became decentralized, I would say, because there were rather our people, especially our lawyers responsible for legal approximation, that started to look themselves for some technical specialized events, usually organized by the institutions I already mentioned. So the decentralization consisted here in the fact that the office has to organize it, to notice it, and to pay it. And the same approach started to be followed by the line ministries. What is important to stress that many of our colleagues became very good experts in the particular areas. So without, let's say, without implementing it consciously, we created within our office, but also within the public administration, let's say, training for future trainers part. So we often used our people to as lecturers on these traineeships, scholarships for the people. And the final question, so about the success of the negotiations. So, the success of negotiations is still debated in Poland. But there is another thing. I would say what was important for the success was certainly the high level of expertise of the, I would say, European administrative elite, which was based on regular trainings, expert specialization, but also on practical and daily cooperation with EU institutions and experts, which was a path developed by our people. This is what Marek mentioned and is foreseen also for Ukrainian civil servants. The next important factor was stability of staff. So first of all, as you know, in public administration, when you have elections, even if you have a very good functioning, well-functioning civil service, you cannot avoid disturbances. In case of our office especially, but also in case of the line ministries, we were usually not disturbed by political changes. And this was a very positive factor contributing to the success of our works. We had highly motivated, I would even say, to a certain extent, fanatical people, and what was important was to keep the motivation high over the years, and I think we succeeded in the management. We had very precise and stable coordination procedures, eliminating any attempts of the line ministries to bypass the coordination system. So we had everything in one hand, I would say. We worked in a close involvement with external stakeholders, which was enriching for both sides, so meaning business, meaning universities, meaning experts, etc. It was a key aspect was the absorption of the experiences from previous negotiations and enlargements. So we identified many key persons that were willing to come to organize specific seminars, conferences. By absorption, I do not mean, just organizing meetings and sometimes forgetting it, but writing down and try to implement the conclusions, the recommendations resulting from this meetings, seminars. We also, based on these experiences, we developed in our office, so in the Office of the Committee for European Integration, a very high analytical capacity in selected areas, which were especially important for the outcome of the negotiations. So financial, agriculture, environment, which played for Poland a key role in the negotiations. And this analytical capacity allowed us to create precise instruments which allowed us for quick and financial simulation during the negotiations to assess the proposals of the European Commission that were put on the table. So it was not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not the Ministry of Finance or the Chancellor of Prime Minister. It was us and our people to manage this kind of devices. So this maybe as an introduction. Thank you.
Дякую, пане Рафале. Наступний нас доповідач, наша колежанка.
Next speaker is our colleague from Croatia. This is the person who directly was the deputy head of the negotiation team, assistant minister, and she was responsible for screening and legal approximation in Croatia. We have Tamara Obradovich-Mazel. And I would like to ask Tamara how the activity of the back office of the negotiation was organized within the Croatian government. What I mean is whether you set up some specific departments or bodies, or it was evenly distributed among different line departments, and how you were addressing the issues of competencies, recruitment, training, and traditionally What are the tips for Ukraine in light of Croatian experience? What Ukraine really should look for in this process? Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let me first start by saying that I'm honored to have been invited to take part in this conference, and I also use this opportunity to pay my respects to Ukrainian people and your courage to sustain this situation, which I hope is not going to last long. Going back to your question and reflecting to what previous speakers have said, using their own personal experience, like the very recent speaker from Poland, who was heading an entire structure that was similar to mine. I would like to go back a few steps, if you don't mind, just to shed more light upon the negotiating structure which we developed after some 6-7 solid years working on the European integration, attempting to reach that point where we would be offered finally the candidacy and sit behind the desk to negotiate. We started rather early in 98, 99, and we faced absolutely identical issues, identical challenges of civil service as so many countries before us, countries that we have advised, countries that we have resorted to for assistance. When we wanted to not only create the institutions and capacity building, but we also wanted to understand what was it exactly that was expected from country. What was it expected from us to deliver concretely? And we slowly started building our capacities together with building our understanding of what is required of us to do. When we started out, we were a very small integration office. We were a government's office for European integration. There was a very limited number of people, and we were primarily focused on information campaigns, communication strategy, and legal approximation. There was an entire number of 4 lawyers who were basically in charge of legal harmonization in Croatia. And these were our capacities to start with. At the same time, one of the crucial moments, one of the crucial programs that the Croatian government developed was a scholarship program, whereby either existing civil servants or excellent students or excellent or people employed somewhere else aspiring to live abroad for a year, take their masters and come back to work for the government would find this attractive. So this program initially was a pool of human resources specialized in particular areas of European law, but also policies and economics, who would spend their year taking up masters, returning to Croatian government for a mandatory 3 to 5 year period. And they would be primarily in the first few cycles allocated in the Ministry of European Affairs, for instance, in my directorate or my colleague's directorate. But as the cycles went on, we deployed such sector-specific people to other ministries, because it's other ministries that, in a substantive terms, were crucial and still are for legal transposition. They are the ones who understand the sector. It's not the Ministry of European Integration that would take care of either wood products or blue tongue disease or financial services in terms of taking over banking directives. It's all responsible ministries. So it was very important to start building their capacities, their English language to the level of addressing the interlocutors in Brussels, but also to understand the spirit of the directive, to understand the notion of the acquis that they need to transpose into a Croatian legal tradition, specific legal circumstance. The EU legislation is more common law driven, even though it has its continental origin, and Croatia is a continental circle law tradition country, as many others, would normally need to think how to transpose a semi-common law principles to a continental legal tradition, and to avoid, like so many others do, to avoid a typical trap, I dare say, of simply copy-pasting the essence of the directive into a national legislation. Why a trap? Because the follow-up question as to how a legal document is then lived, what level of protection do we offer to the addressee of the law, and to what extent, who is basically in charge of the review process, what are the entitlements of the addressee of such transposed law within a national framework, those are the key questions. Who is there to implement such legislation? Is there an institution in place? Does this institution have sufficient number of civil servants in charge? Are they educated to specifically implement this particular piece of legislation? These are all the implementation questions that the Commission is primarily interested in finding out, not whether the directive has been transposed and how many actually directives have been transposed. If I learned anything from my experience with the Commission leading the legal approximation process in Croatia, was the position of Commission who would tell me and my team, come to us with one quality 100%, all the way legal protection, judiciary, right to appeal, transposed piece of legislation, instead of 100 that you have merely copy-pasted, so to speak. And that would be the point of screening, if I may derail from the topic for 30 seconds. Those are precisely the questions that we were asked during bilateral screening. They were not interested in the compliance per se, the transposition per se, but the living of the legal document, the how and with whom, and the appeals process and the interactors in the implementation. Those were the areas that Commission really wanted to find out from us that we delivered. So we started early on with the capacity building. We faced a civil service that was not really understanding the notion of the acquis. That's one thing. Second, didn't really also comply with the overall political aspiration of the country to become the member of the EU and embark on the European integration. What does that mean? The political sphere of the country would normally address the people as, we aspire to become the members of the EU, we are ready we perceive ourselves as the European Union country. The reality of civil service, to be very blunt and honest, is fine, but our usual way of life is the things we do, and we don't emotionally, perhaps so much, understand the political aspiration. So this gap needed to be closed. I would say that the energy and the emotion behind the political will to become the member of the EU, we needed to transpose also to all walks of life. So besides the scholarship program, we introduced sector-specific education for civil service, and those would be across all areas across all chapters of the acquis. So agricultural people would receive their very, very sector-specific training in agriculture and fisheries, in phytosanitary and health. We'd receive very concrete and precise training in procurement, in state aid, competition, industry-related legislation. So all chapters would be covered. What we also introduced was a very light education for state officials, the policymakers. Civil service is one thing, yet the political appointees also needed to understand to what extent could they exactly fight the political battles, not to allow for the transposed legislation to be victimized by what is only natural between political parties, by their internal political battles. So we very early on in the process agreed with all the parliamentary political parties, whether position or opposition, to have their naturally driven political fights amongst them. Yet, when it comes to NPAA, when it comes to transposition and implementation of such legislation, to leave the acquis-related legislation out of the political arena, out of the battle, out of the political battle, not to dispute nor question, and even more important so, when the legislation comes to the parliament, not to provide for such amendments that would distort the philosophy of legislation transposed. We also introduced education, very long-term education in terms of project cycle management, which was an extremely useful educational program for all people in the ministry, but also on regional level, to understand how projects are prepared and driven and financed. And those are basically the people who would then prepare fishes for financing, that would prepare projects, and they are still on within the administration, but also in private sector, who are now successful in drawing money, financing projects from the EU funds. One of the things that we have also done to help ourselves is to have secondments between specifically my directorate and lawyers employed in my directorate, each and every in charge of a particular chapter of the acquis. So my lawyers, members of my team, would go, since they were specialized for transport, for environment, for public procurement, they would once a week go to the responsible ministry and actually have an office there. So they would at some point even spend more time weekly working with the sectoral colleagues in Ministry of Transport, Agriculture, than to be sitting in our ministry. Though that approach helped my lawyers to understand sectoral policies and sectoral legislation better. And on the other hand, it helped the sectoral ministries to understand the philosophy, the point, and the extent of the transposition. And these core people, lawyers, from my directorate, we didn't hire or create new institution to run the negotiations, basically. We did establish a structure, but the negotiation secretariat and liaison officers for screening and negotiating positions, the negotiations themselves, following up benchmarkings all the way to closure of negotiations, those were people employed in my directorate. So the same lawyer in charge of, for instance, transport was in charge for legal harmonization on a daily basis, preparation annually of the NPAA, the National Program for the Adoption of the Acquis, and for negotiations. So these people, for a couple of years, more or less, had 3 different heavy tasks, yet only one salary. And if I may add, speaking of salaries, unfortunately, no particular incentive was introduced ever for the people participating both in the association phase and accession phase. There were incentives such as foreign education twice a year, additional schooling if somebody needed, perspective of, for instance, promotion to a higher pay grade, higher position, but no, specifically in financial terms, we never benefited from an increase of salaries just because we were doing a job that we were doing. So in a nutshell, to use the words of my esteemed colleague from Poland, we were entirely fanatic. So we were a team of fanatic people driving this huge entire process all the way up to 2013 when we became members. And if I may add one more point, we have spent quite a lot of time, which is only natural because of the topic of this conference, on civil service. Yet I would like to draw all of our attention to local and regional governments as well, to local level of a country. We have 20 countries, a number of 20 counties, 20 regional self-governance with 20 capitals in Croatia. We approached the counties and all capitals to also introduce education for regional servants. And those would be primarily in the area of, initially, of course, on a general level, on the EU institutions and why Croatia wanted to be a member state. But afterwards, we specialized and focused on agriculture, waste management, water management, and project cycle management because of the specificity of regional policy in the context of the membership. So, in a nutshell, that would be a very, very short and very concise overview of numerous communication, information, and also educational programs and campaigns we ran and are still running. And if I may also underline, a very firm, non-negotiable coordination mechanism, trust, and the charisma of the leading people is needed, not to be, as somebody said, overrun by other ministers or by other ministries. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that the entire government stands behind the key people leading this process, and that the mechanism is coordinated in a firm, collegiate, transparent, helpful, but again, firm way to deliver the goals. Thank you, and I'm available, of course, for questions at a later stage.
Дякую, пані Тамара.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite our colleague from Latvia, Esmeralda Balode-Buraca. Now she is a lecturer at Latvian University, but she's a former civil servant. And as far as I understand, she was the one who was involved in the training on European integration when Latvia was in the negotiation process on the EU accession. So therefore, I would like to appeal to your experience, not from the perspective of the person who teaches, but who was the learner. What was your experience of learning? Who were your peers? What were you learning, and how were you able to combine your work in the government and learning? And maybe what would be better to change, because Ukraine is only to develop. So what we should emphasize and what should be best avoided. And finally, I have a kind of a more professional question. Do you believe that for EU success, you ought to emphasize lawyers? Because approximation of the legal base is very important, but working a lot with lawyers in the area of public policy, I see a bottleneck is the interaction with the environment, business association, and what we call stakeholders beyond the government. In your opinion, what are the basic skills that people should have when they are in the negotiation process, and how to build these environments that they should represent in the negotiation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's my true pleasure to participate in this discussion. And secondly, I will start from the very end, just to say that lawyers are always a bottleneck. I'm practicing lawyer as well, and I can confirm you that during my 20 years practice, it's always so, and it will always remain so. But starting from the very beginning, yes, I'm a clear example or product of such an education program. As I mentioned, I graduated exactly 20 years ago. We or our government had agreed with that on that time with Danish government. The program was started with Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs on organizing the program. The program was started at the Rio Graduate School of Law and organized in cooperation with the Copenhagen Business School. Other Danish universities and high schools were also involved in terms of offering participation of their law professors. So basically, I've studied EU law from the best Danish professors and also practitioners. And so the program started at 2000. So it was 4 years before our accession. And the selection procedure was quite simple. Each and every ministry had the right to nominate one person. First requirements were, first of all, bachelor degree in law. In our situation, bachelor degree was required because the program had to end up with us receiving masters in EU law diplomas. So this was academic program. So bachelor degree, first of all, and English, passing English test. It was approximate level B2. After that, after this nomination, so I participated and I was nominated by the European Integration Office. It was not the ministry, but this was the office directly under the Prime Minister, coordinating the integration into the EU. Law approximation, information campaigns, so basically different angles, not just law. And the program's length was 1.5 years, so even a bit more than usual master's program. Precondition was that we are not allowed to work on daily basis. Basically, our bosses were prohibited to let us to enter into the office. Of course, it's a bit of joke, but the precondition was that we will not work, we cannot be engaged, we devote full time to studies. I can confirm that it really took full time, at the very beginning even more. So it was reading as just an example. So if you assign to that, and I can just encourage you to use all the opportunities to do so. So first months may take you all the nights reading textbooks, 60, 80 pages for the next day. If you have not studied your bachelor in English, it's quite tough actually. So it may be that in first pages you are probably translating 10 and more words. So then the next pages it's less and less. And so this is how you proceed and speed up with reading. But yes, it may take day and night long. You have to devote all your time. I can also encourage people who are not probably youngsters as I was at that time. So there were different age groups. The elderly person was around 50 years old. There were also people with young kids, with children. So everything was manageable, but it requires full 100% attention and even a little bit more. So after the selection process, we had to pass this English test, as I mentioned, and also we had a motivation interview. Motivation is a key of everything, basically the key of success. So once there is motivation, the age or any other factors, or probably previous experience with EU law or the fact if you have studied it in your bachelor's program or not, it doesn't really matter. So the motivation decides everything. We had 3 semesters. One of them was general EU law. It was in our country, in Riga. So we could stay at home, going on daily basis, going to a university. Second semester was in Denmark, so we spent 1 semester in Copenhagen studying there. A group of 15. Finally, it was 15 people from the government. Of course, all those pluses being mentioned by first speaker Marek Tabo, so that there is a consolidation of groups, that you get to know each other, that there are cross-sectoral communication. I can confirm that this all turns out afterwards and pays back in a very high degree. So people have formal, informal contact. Basically, they know what the others know. It helped us also after accession to the EU to establish integrated group under the government, EU law group, which could coordinate EU matters in each and every ministry. So basically these people were EU law coordinators afterwards in their ministries. And finally, the third semester was devoted for internships and for thesis defenses. As regards internships, so we as a group, we visited EU institutions, both in Brussels and in Luxembourg. And as regards individual internships, we had a chance to choose. Either we want to go to the EU institutions or any other government. We were supposed to choose our specialization, not in terms of sectoral law, but either specializing in negotiations or specializing in EU Court of Justice issues. I opted for the second one, EU Court of Justice, and my decision was to go for an internship to the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So basically, I was trained, coached, I would say, there by their attorney at the EU Court of Justice, and this is my job after accession. So in 3 years, I passed the competition, and I was the Latvian first agent at the EU Court of Justice. So what are the main takeaways? Here I would quote back speaker Tamara, who spoke before me. So the most important takeaway from all these studies are that you have not only the very detailed knowledge of EU law, but you grasp the spirit of EU law. And it means that, especially for countries like Latvia, like Ukraine, was this, if I may say, was post-Soviet legal background. It's very important to grasp the spirit, to understand how to switch away from normativism. And we realized it quite fast and quite effectively that even if the law is not that detailed as you would like it to be, you still have to search for the aim of that law, for the spirit. And it's it goes through not only the application of the law, I mean civil servants who are going to apply also in Ukraine the EU law, but also judiciary, for judiciary to switch to totally different way of reasoning and applying law in its essence. I mean, if there is like insignificant error in law or some incompleteness, so it's irrelevant. And this was a, let's say, major takeaway for civil servants, for judges, for all the lawyers to understand that it works a little bit differently. And once you grasp this, so the rest is just techniques in each and every area. So, I mean, after these studies, you are able to explain, for example, your granny or your neighbor. So what is the EU law about? To answer the questions like, will they be allowed to sell their cucumbers, which are not probably the standard ones? So the answer is yes, they will be able to sell them in their local markets as they did before accession. And ending up with answering the questions of parliamentarians, for example. So what will be with your constitution? Is it going to be somehow interrupted or in simple terms damaged? So you will be able to answer each and every question, explaining it in a simple manner to basically to everybody. So what I would recommend for Ukrainian civil servants, definitely not to miss an opportunity if there is any chance to jump into the program, even if this is just an online module, trying to find some time, especially if it's for free, if you don't need to pay for that. So just take it, because in after several years, so you will have to seek opportunities where to borrow and how to do as our youngsters do it now, and they are still ready to do that for their own financing. So just grab opportunities to use each and every lecture, either online or face to face, because studies and trainings like these, they create so-called spillover effect. So participants in these programs, so you will be those who will kick the snowball, and it will go down, and you will passionate the other colleagues. And I will not talk too long. Of course, I could do, because this was really the best decision during my life, and I'm simply infected by the EU law, and I'm still doing this only from different angle. I did this for the government for 10 years. Yes, as it was mentioned, we also had agreements for at least 5 years working for our governments. I did it for more than 10, and I would still do this. Now I'm teaching students. But coming back to one of the last questions, about lawyers and are these lawyers who do this? So coming back to the question of bottleneck, I mean, you need lawyers who study EU law in a master's program. You need them simply to be able to explain the EU law, but this is just a small group of people. All the other civil servants, either working in agriculture ministry or Ministry of Culture or Ministry of Education, any other ministry, basically everybody will tackle an angle of the EU law. And then if you master at least on the very, very core essence, the major principles, the way how it has to be interpreted, how the EU law has to be perceived for each and every professional, not only lawyer, far from lawyer, yes, from any other background, with any other background. So then it's easy for you. You will feel yourself more confident when working with EU law. So I will stop here. I hope I answered the main questions.
Дякую, пані Есмеральдо.
Thank you, Esmeralda. Unfortunately, our time is really up, but we do have some questions from participants, and we have some short for example, to Marek, the courses and the lectures that have been prepared by Natalia, will they be available online for anybody interested?
If we are talking about the courses developed in the framework of the Natalia for capacity building, they are available online, but they are not open, if you like. So it's not that anyone can access. With the Government Office for Coordination of European Euro-Atlantic Integration, NACST, and EU delegation, we have a special procedure designed to register for the trainings. Just want to keep track of who is registering, because they are targeting or tailored to the needs of the civil servants. So the best way for those who are interested in taking the courses and are civil servants is to go to the NACS website, and then from there you can apply for the Natalia for capacity building courses. There was also a question from Irina if there are any other training programs besides. Okay, sorry, no. Okay, so, about the lectures available online, I think I would in a nutshell, that's how it looks for the time being.
Окей, колеги, якщо дозволите ще одне питання, яке в мене виникло.
So then, if you would allow me a question that emerged in the context of what Esmeralda has been saying. Have there been similar training for judges in your country? Because there are changes in the material law and the experience of other countries. And generally, with the judiciary, with the judges, have been any targeted training or orientation sessions. So I think that it's relevant both for Latvia, Poland, and Croatia.
Yes, I will start then. So as regards Latvia, there was no specific master's program for judges, but what was done very extensively, Judges Training Center organized learning sessions and trainings for judges. Initially, the target group was administrative judges. Afterwards, also general jurisdiction judges, because not only administrative but also other judges face EU law questions like employment or labor law, for example, as an example, corporate law, and so on. I was lecturing especially for administrative judges for about 5 or 6 years, and then new judges came in, and these new judges were holding already their masters in EU and international law. But yes, as for Latvia, so a Judges Training Center took care on this.
Дякую. Прошу, пані Тамара, а як справи були в Хорватії?
Tamara, could you tell us about Croatian experience?
Вибачте, ви виключений звук.
Tamara, we cannot hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Я прошу, включіть мікрофон, пані Тамара.
That would be my mistake. The Croatian experience in terms of training the judges and judiciary. Can I have that translated?
Oh, yes, I am translating you into Ukrainian.
Yeah. So the question is about the experience in judiciary. That was the question, yes. Yes, during the negotiations, we have established the Judicial Academy, whereby the judges of the Administrative Court, Commercial Court, and civil court would be educated in their respective competences for not only the EU acquis per se, but also the philosophy and the spirit of transposition. Most importantly, what the Croatian judges since then, through Judicial Academy, have been trained to also perceive is the decisions and the decision-making process, the opinions of Advocate General, and the importance of all involved in adopting a decision of the European Union Court. Those would be specific trainings for the Croatian judges. And ever since, the program for Croatian judges is in place through the Judicial Academy. And if I may so say, since I'm having left civil service, I'm now a practicing attorney, like my colleague used to be. Majority of complexity, or the most complex problems that our judges still face to understand, but are getting better and better and even more equipped to ask for preliminary opinions, is the area of competition and state aid. All other matters, I would say, our judges have got the notion to when it comes to the acquis. But if I may highlight, in the last nine years of minimum 9 years of judicial training of judges in EU acquis, that would be the implementation, the understanding of complex questions in the area of competition and state aid. So to answer your question, yes, it has been organized, it has been structured, it still goes on. And EU legislation, EU law and institutions are part of the bar exam. And EU law and institutional questions are also part of the state exam for civil servants, so that the aspiring lawyers, practicing lawyers, whether in judiciary, state attorney's office, or in private practice, they all go through filter of having at least a minimum notion of the EU acquis and practice.
Дуже дякую, пані Тамара. Ну і пане
So thank you. And Rafal, your input, please.
Oh, so I'm sorry, but my input will be very modest. So I'm not a lawyer. I just noticed during my work in the Polish office of the committee that judges were participating in the initiatives I designed, but they also had some specific courses organized by the Ministry of Justice. But I cannot say more about this specific topic. Sorry.
Дуже дякую. Ще в нас
Thank you. We have other questions that are quite specific and primarily to Marek. They are wondering about the selection, and they ask what would be the major focus, motivation or experience in civil service. I can presume that it's from the person who has no experience in civil service but is highly motivated.
I'm not sure if I got the question really. Can you help on that?
Мені варто уточнити, так?
Would you like me to repeat again?
Yes, please.
Among the requirements for the candidates to select participants, what would be the prevailing factor? Motivation, language, or the adequate background in civil service?
Well, there are sort of hard criteria and soft criteria for selection. And the hard criteria are being an active civil servant, having worked in the Ukrainian civil service for 2 years, and prior engagement in European integration issues. Consent from the superiors and the NACs. And then motivation is probably something that if you have two candidates with equal formal backgrounds, then that's when probably motivation will kick in with more influence. And there's of course the question of language, so B1, which is the minimum. But of course, the formal criteria are set in the contract, so these will have to be respected. And just to maybe add the selection will be, I mean, on our side, we would not be in the position really to analyze the person's engagement, European integration issues in the previous 2 years and the motivation, etc. So that is why the selection will be handled in Kyiv by the government office and NACs.
Зрозуміло. Дуже дякую. Пані Есмеральда, у вас...
So thank you. Esmeralda, we have a question from one of our participants about the second foreign language. They ask about French. Are there any formal requirements like B1? Is there anything similar for French? Or is the second foreign language proficiency is an additional asset or preference for success in this work?
Yes, thank you for this question. It's important that French was mentioned today. French is important. It's not crucial, but it would be good if you start with French courses as well. So English is must-have. You cannot survive without English. Either you are a lawyer or not. So you need one of these languages to first of all to study and to understand the EU law. But as regards French, I'd say it's must-have for a lawyer who wants to specialize in EU law, but it's just about the lawyers. It's important to learn it up to the level where you have at least passive knowledge of the language. So I mean that you can read the documents and probably say at least minimum of phrases. But yes, so my answer would be for a lawyer, it's must have. I suppose if the question is about the program and studying, so of course you can do it in English easily, but French is a strong preference. And if you see your career developing further within this domain of EU laws, and French also has to be learned.
Дуже дякую, пані Есмеральдо. І питання до останнє вже, мабуть.
Thank you. And now probably the last question to Tamara. What are the areas of Croatian legislation have been most affected and transformed in the process of transposition?
What areas of acquis have been most difficult to transpose?
Тут питання не про найскладніше.
No, it's not about what were the most difficult, but let's say in the matter of scope, which areas of your domestic legislation has been most affected?
Obviously, by the volume of the acquis, the most affected areas of any national legal system mathematically gets mostly affected in the most voluminous parts of the acquis, such as agriculture, such as financial services, transport, energy, climate. Those would be the largest number, the largest volume of the acquis, mathematically speaking, when looking at the number of regulations which are directly applicable, looking at the number of the directives that you need to transpose into national legislation, most would be in those areas. And we struggled also with financial services legislation, everything that included banking, insurance, factoring sector, etc., etc. In terms of both volume and difficulties, but also challenges for national economy and operators, those would be telecommunication and energy sectors. Those would be these chapters. Those would be those parts of the legal system. But to be very precise, it is much easier to speak about the areas of national legislation that has not been affected by acquis than to highlight the ones affected by acquis. This would be pieces of national legislation really not affected, where the competency, direct competency, national competency still lies with the state, rather than the entire body of national legislation that has been affected and still is by the acquis. So the ratio between affected and non-affected is absolutely higher in terms of your entire national legal order basically gets affected by the acquis on daily basis.
Зрозуміло. Дуже дякую, пані Тамара. Ну, я думаю...
Thank you, Tamara. I think that we have a little bit overused our time, but in the Aspen Institute Kiev, we have a traditional procedure of feedback from our audience. So if you would like to share your reflections, so we can allow a couple of minutes for this. We thank all our participants, and I think that the speakers would be really very interested in hearing your feedback. So if you would like to share, please raise your hand in Zoom.
Так, є одне питання. Людмила Лахтионова, прошу.
Yes, we have Ludmila. You're welcome.
Людмила, ви нас чуєте? Так, я звук включила. Чути мене? Так, вас добре чути, будь ласка.
Ну, я хочу всіх привітати з такою цікавою
I would really congratulate all of us on this very interesting gathering and session. And for us, it has been also very interesting to listen, and we have a number of takeaways for our institute actually to direct itself. I can't hear the participant. Yeah, I'm sorry, can't hear anyone.
Пані Людмила, вибачте, вас не чути. Можете включити мікрофон? Чомусь обірвався. Да, прошу.
Oh, this is the technical thing. So once again, greetings. It has been really an interesting and useful event. So this is National Aviation University that I represent. I really have some takeaways because we have a common goal, common path. It's European integration, and we are moving forward with confidence. And the recommendations that we have heard, I will take it to my daily work. This is about networking and achieving the results. So it has been a pleasure to participate. Thank you. So then, on my part, I want to thank you once again. And also the leaders who have found the time, the European colleagues. I do believe that it has been really very useful in terms of hearing their priorities. We have heard about very significant experience of our European colleagues, and we have a number of important takeaways. Once again, my sincere gratitude on behalf of the Aspen Institute, and we wish you success in your professional career.